Yeah, we've seen a lot of movement in terms of media reporting, in terms of electoral-related issues. In the first report, we have noticed that election-related reporting was quite down. In fact, we have counted about just less than 2,000 election-related statements, and in this report, we have recorded over 5,000. So there was almost 100% increase in election-related reporting, and for us, that shows that the media is beginning to focus much more on election issues, and also what we've noticed that some of the political parties that were very low in the rankings in terms of them making statements, them coming forward, there was quite a lot of upward movement, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So based on the findings of these reports, what are the determining factors perhaps indicating improved media coverage of political parties? I mean, considering that not all parties are equally active, and also considering what is driving the event at a given time.
In fact, that is the major thing. What we've noticed is that the reporting still is very much reactive. There is no agenda specifically, and unfortunately, both from the political parties and also from even the media. And some people don't understand what we say. Excuse me. Some people don't understand what we mean with agenda setting. Agenda setting in a context that, for example, from the last report, we have seen that the opposition political parties are mainly reported on if there is a crisis or there is an event. And political parties are not out of their own setting the agenda, being proactive in organizing media events. They are waiting for the media to report on them. Similarly, what we have noticed, and we subscribe this mainly to the absence of manifestos, what we have seen is that even the media would not proactively craft stories on a specific agenda in terms of the kind of questions that the voters and the electorate would want to put on the agenda for political parties to consider and to run with it. And we are hopeful that now, with more manifestos being released, that going forward we would see much more agenda-setting articles. It's like, what is this manifesto talking about, and comparing. In fact, I was very surprised, not surprised actually, surprised is not the right word. I actually liked the front page story of the Namibian this last Friday. And they, for example, took the issue of homosexuality to make that a point, for example. It's like comparing the various stances of the political parties on the issue of the LGBTI communities. And surprisingly, what came out of that report, of course, this is not what our report is saying, but what our report is saying, these are the kind of reports that we want to read and see in the papers. Like, for example, on Friday, it's like none of the political parties, in as much as they would want the LGBTI community as voters, put the LGBTI community's issues as part of their agenda. For them, it's not an issue. People must repent and so forth. So that is what we're talking about here.
Right, yeah. Now, from the two reports, or from what the two reports reflect, is there any indication perhaps that certain media is biased towards a specific political party in terms of coverage?
To be very honest, we do not go into that much detail. What we are basically trying to do with this is very specific. What we do, we cover the amount of statements done throughout the month. We then see how much of the statements for a given in a given month has been is for a certain political party. Say, for example, like in the first month of our report, we have counted 1,900 and something statements in total. And we have seen that during the first month, from that statement, 50% of that was allocated to the ruling party. With that, we're not trying to say that the media houses biased towards the SWAPO party. We are basically saying the SWAPO party, during the first month of our reporting or monitoring, got the biggest share of the reporting on whatever story that was. There were many stories related to, and that was across the board for private media, state media, radio, television, and even online. So that's what we basically say. And then what we've seen again, as we said, during the second month, the reporting that the share of the reporting that the ruling party SWAPO got was 10% less, and much more, not much more, and more of the opposition parties were also receiving coverage. And so we're not really trying to say that they are biased. We leave that in the hands of the electorate to decide for themselves. And of course, we are also looking in terms of the frequency, where exactly which party is mentioned in the beginning, which party is mentioned in the middle of a news bulletin, and so forth. We're looking at frequency, we're looking at tone, and we're looking at the framing and so forth. And based on all this, it is on to the electorate to decide whether or not a media house is biased towards a certain political party. Ours is just to report the findings, and the idea is for the general public to run with this information, to make their own senses out of this and decide for themselves.
So, Dr. Nakuta, what are some of the specific identified incidents or unfair coverage of the electoral cycle so far would you point out?
As the Media Ombudsman, we have set up a special desk on election-related reporting. As part of running parallel to this election monitoring project that we are running under the Office of the Media. So far, we have only received during the period 2 election-related complaints. The one launched was lodged by the Deputy Minister of Transport, Mr. Negongo, and that was against the Namibian in the sense that he was misframed and he was quoted out of context, and he was made to sound as if he was instigating hate speech and violence during one of the rallies that he conducted somewhere in May, June in the north. We had a mediation session, myself, Mr. Negongo, and the deputy editor from the Namibian, and we resolved that indeed the deputy minister was quoted out of context. In fact, it was more a sensationalist reporting from the side of the Namibian, and the Namibian was reprimanded and tasked to make a correction in terms of that, and they did so. The other one that we've received was also from the ECN. In terms of the ECN lodged a complaint with the Media Ombudsman in the sense that somewhere in June, July, the Namibian Sun reported front page, for example, that some of our electoral data, personal data, is kept in Hong Kong on foreign soil. And the ECN took very strong exception. And last week, Wednesday, I received the official response from the Namibian, the editor of the Namibian Sun, Mr. Toivo Njabela, because in terms of the code, once there's a complaint, the media house is having 21 days to respond, and after 21 days only can the Media Ombudsman then go ahead to resolve and to settle the report, to make adjudication. So last week, we've received the response, and then the idea is then sometime next week, the ECN and Mr. Njabela or a representative of the Sun would be brought together to see how we can resolve this complaint. So far only 2, but the media, the general public is encouraged to lay complaints, election-related complaints, in terms of reporting, not on all the other issues relating to the elections, only in as far as it relates to unfair or biased reporting that you want to lodge against a specific media house, that you lodge such a complaint with the Office of the Media Ombudsman.
Right. Well, Dr. Nakuta, just in closing, perhaps, media does play the role of informer, especially or essentially assisting the ECN to carry out its voter education messages to the public as the election date is drawing closer. What have you observed, on how local media is covering elections so far, and perhaps what does the media need in order to carry out their role effectively?
Well, in my view, the media is really doing quite well. They are doing their best to educate and to keep the electorate abreast about every stage of the electoral phase. But of course, there's always room for improvement. I'm aware, for example, that there's call from media practitioners for the ECN to proactively, much more so, disclose electoral-related information. They are complaining, for example, it is very difficult for the ECN times release relevant election-related information. On the other hand, the media should also not unnecessarily see the ECN as being uncooperative, but recognize the pressure under which the institution is working. Because for me, we are all in this together. In terms of the last part, are there any specific incidents, or what can the media do in terms of the coverage? The media is really just doing their business in terms of reporting. And for this reason, the media should be given the space to begin to do their work. So often we see that the media is not given the necessary recognition to do their work, and the media is seen as a nuisance. And we are calling on those that are in power. In fact, last month I've received a complaint, a verbal complaint from one of the colleagues in the North, journalists, complaining that during the election campaign of the SWAPO presidential candidate, her guards and security personnel are treating them with disdain and disrespect. They are not allowed, for example, to interview her. And we are saying such kind of conduct is uncalled for. The media is not a nuisance. The media is there to inform the nation. And people, those in charge, must begin to recognize the important role that the media is playing in this regard, the role of educating and informing the nation.